We are now live on YouTube as well. What is up, YouTube? I got Instagram here as well. I got my joint. Tonight I am smoking a blend of pink tuna and wedding cake. I assume wedding cake is the same thing as birthday cake. They just charge 3 times as much. So anyways, let's get into it. So what's going on with you guys? Any questions? All right, let's do this. How would you approach a cold call to someone on a probate property? I wouldn't necessarily approach it a lot differently than the way I'd approach any other cold call. That's awesome, Joe. So yeah, like any phone call is really just about rapport building that relationship with the seller, understanding their why. All that's absolutely critical when it comes to real estate investing, and definitely important when you're getting on the phone with potential sellers. All right, I put an offer on a 5-plex, and the owner wouldn't accept an offer that has inspections due to fire upgrades she thinks she needs. Any tips? Yeah, so every now and then you'll find sellers that have these weird arbitrary things that they just refuse to do that sometimes don't even make sense. So maybe there's a way that you can remove the inspection clause, still have another condition at your sole and absolute discretion, which you'll use as your exit clause, but then have just a walkthrough condition that'll let you walk through, and maybe you still walk through with an inspector. You know, like sometimes there's weird ways where we can still get exactly what we want, but we just need to frame or present it slightly differently. So that would be my first thought in regards to a seller that for whatever reason doesn't want to let you do an inspection. All right, what else is going on here in the chats? Oh man, pretty light night actually so far, so all right. What else is going on here? Hey man, any idea where to get good deals on internet? No, I don't. Frugality is not the thing I focus on much anymore. I don't have anything against it. I think frugality is just a muscle and or a skill that you can always call back upon. And so for myself, it's not a skill set I necessarily need to implement a lot these days. So I'm not focused on pinching pennies, clipping coupons, any of that stuff. So when people are like, what's the absolute cheapest way to do X, Y, Z? I don't know. I'm not the guy. Mike Rosehart might be able to help you though. What else is going on YouTube? Are crime scene homes, drug lab, grow homes disclosed by the agents to buyers? Dave, that's going to be very region specific, so you're going to want to check your local province or state rules around what the disclosures are. Certainly here in Ontario, if there's been like a grow up of a certain size, there's going to be disclosure required with that because of the potential health implications. So that's definitely something to be aware of. Because oftentimes, right, with a drug house, and usually when we're talking about a drug house with real estate, we're talking about a house that was growing marijuana. And so usually the houses that were growing marijuana, oftentimes like the electrical or other mechanical elements of the house have been, tinkered with by the growers, and that's never ideal. Oftentimes they don't take the proper ventilation either when they're growing their plants, so there ends up being moisture buildup and things like that. You can end up with all kinds of mold throughout your drywall. Really can cause a lot of damage and have serious consequences. So definitely something to be aware of. If you suspect that a property has been used as a grow up, I would encourage you to either get someone in to inspect it that has a that specializes in that, or you can bring in a remediation company if you know that there's issues and you want to figure out what the cost is going to be. All right. Your thoughts on housing price direction 2020, 2021, 2022? Um, you know, I don't have a crystal ball. No one does have a crystal ball in regards to where house prices are going. My bigger question to you is, does it matter? Does it matter where house prices go? And it really only matters if you're only counting on the greater fool theory when it comes to investing, right? Or unless you're trying to time the market. But understand that time in the market is not nearly as important as time in the market. And yeah, I know that's cliche, but it's kind of cliche for a reason. That's because there's a strong logic behind it there. And so it shouldn't really matter whether prices stay the same, go up, or go slightly down over the next couple of years if you've got the right investment strategies. And so realistically, I don't think any sophisticated investor gets too worried about slight changes in prices. Now, that doesn't mean that we're completely naive or oblivious to macroeconomic events and how they may impact the real estate market. We certainly want to stay abreast of those things. And, I do to a mild degree. So for me, it's much more about focusing on things like affordability and other key metrics like that, which are going to be strong indicators of whether, my properties are likely to continue to cash flow, because that's the strategy I'm invested in. Hey Matt, 17-year-old dude, and I'm quite interested in real estate. What's the best way to get a good start to learn and make money, laugh out loud? I'm turning 18 soon, so I want to start planning. Redlining. I've heard the word redlining, but I don't actually know what that means, so you'll have to explain it. But for the 17-year-old, what's the best way to get started in real estate investing? If you're 17, 18, if you're really young and you've got a lot of time but not a lot of money, what I would recommend that you focus on in regards to real estate investing is developing a useful skill set that's going to aid you throughout your years of real estate. And in general, I think most people are well served learning sales. And even more so, if you want to niche down in that regards, I think wholesaling is a great skill set to develop at a young age. You don't necessarily need to do it alone. You could work as a bird dog and work with other investors, and essentially just get paid a finder's fee. But for example, if you were in my local market and you were willing to go after private sellers and you gave me phone numbers, for every phone number you gave me that I ended up buying the property for, I would happily pay you $500 to $1,000. And so realistically, it's quite possible to make, a couple $1,000s a month, part-time, just nights and weekends, finding these private sellers, introducing a wholesaler or an investor like myself to them, and then getting that referral fee. Now, again, it's going to take real time and effort and energy, and on a dollar per hour basis, you may not even end up making much more than you would minimum wage. But what you need to understand is that you're developing such a strong skill set. And when you decide it's the right time to really go into real estate investing for yourself, you're just going to be in such a better position than any other investor when they get started off. And understand that wholesaling, deal with private sellers, in my opinion, that's one of the most important parts of the entire real estate investing puzzle. So if you can get good at finding deals, if you can get good at finding opportunities, that's all that really matters. And in fact, I would even take a step further and be like, if you're good at that, the other pieces will just fall into place. If you get really good at finding amazing deals, the money will find you. Like, all you need to do is make it aware that you're looking for money and it will find you. And it's not too hard to find one or two potentially large money partners that will really help bankroll you. Again, if you get good at finding absolutely amazing deals. Now, the problem is most investors, when they get started, they don't actually find amazing deals because they don't negotiate hard enough, because they're too embarrassed and they have imposter syndrome. And so if you've never heard of imposter syndrome, it's simply this concept that most of us are victims of, and that's where we never think we're good enough. We never think we've got a strong enough skill set. Imposter syndrome for myself is being like, oh, are you really that good of a YouTuber? Are you really that good of a real estate investor? Are you really that good at giving people, financial tips or teaching them or anything like that? And it's like, maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But what just happened there? Instagram, come on. Fuck's sakes. All right, so my Instagram froze. So that's fun. All right, I will get back to this in one sec. Come on. Oh, are we back? Instagram, am I still here? Let me know. But yeah, as a 17-year-old, I would really focus on getting good at finding opportunities and really just then using that to also build relationships. Because each person that you introduce that deal to that pays you a bird dog or a finder's fee, and then if that's a wholesaler that's then selling to someone else, I would try and get connected with the end buyer and use, again, leverage that into more relationships. And again, to me, so much of this is just networking, building up relationships, getting connected, all that stuff. Oh, imposter syndrome. Yeah, that's what I was on before Instagram froze. God damn it, Instagram. But imposter syndrome, I don't think there's a silver bullet to solving imposter syndrome. It's something that everyone goes through at different points in their lives or career. I think the key is understanding that this is a journey. It's an iterative process. So you're always going to be improving. So literally, you should always look back on your past self and be like, I'm a better version than that person. And that's really my goal. And so if you kind of take this incremental approach, it's not necessarily imposter syndrome. You just need to take a step back and understand how far you've already came. And if you're just getting started, again, just understand that you've got a long way to go. And trying to stay humble throughout the process, I think, is really important. But it's also important that you don't become crippled or paralyzed by imposter syndrome, because there's definitely people that do that, where they literally just stop growing. They stop challenging themselves. They stop trying to go the extra mile because they're scared of what other people think. I think that that's what a lot of imposter syndrome is about. So for myself, I don't need to bombastically claim anything. I'm just on this journey, learning, growing, trying to share. And if that's really the lens I view things through, it's hard for me to fall victim to imposter syndrome. It's only really when my ego is trying to hijack me a bit that imposter syndrome even really creeps up, right? Because otherwise, I'm just doing me. And I mean, if 20 people and another 40 on YouTube want to hang out with me while I smoke weed in my bathroom, let's do it, right? Let's just embrace that. And so I think it's really important to give yourself permission in that sense as well. But if you're letting other people's judgments of you determine your personal scoreboard, then I think you're going to always be on that imposter syndrome hamster wheel. I hope that rambling comment made sense. Oh, Dave, yeah, redlining. If that's I don't believe that's a common practice in Canada, but again, I'm not necessarily in a position where I would know well, but I don't believe so. What's the pros and cons of refinancing a property? Well, it really just comes down to, what the implications are of refinancing that property. Hopefully, the logic that most investors are going to use as to why they like debt and why they like refinancing a property is they believe that they can take that money, borrow it at a low interest rate, and go use it to more productive ends. And even after paying for the cost of that money, paying the interest, the debt cost, then they still believe that they will net benefit. And really, if that's the framework that you're using when you're approaching borrowing debt or borrowing money, very sound logic there, right? And that's really the only process you should be taking into consideration. Everything else is just kind of noise. People get worried about oh, you got so much debt, or my debt service ratio is this or whatever. To me, it's what does that impact, right? What is this accomplishing? What am I working towards? Those are really the only things that I should be viewing and thinking about. Everything else is just noise and distractions. And I think a lot of us really struggle to separate the signal from the noise. Separate the noise from the signal. Matt, what software tools or apps do you find useful in your business? We keep it super simple, guys. So we're using Google, G Suite products. So literally Google Docs, Google Sheets, all that stuff. We're not fancy. So we don't have a complicated CRM. We don't use auto dialers, or We don't even have call rail. We don't record our phone calls. Like literally lean, mean operating machines. And that's not to say that we wouldn't be more optimal if we added on some of those layers of complexity and some of those systems and processes. But at the end of the day, I'm really just focused on getting my team to make more offers, because if you make more offers, you get more deals. It's honestly that simple, and yet it's taken me years to teach my guys that. So go figure. Dre's just asking me to repeat the scoreboard quote in regards to imposter syndrome. So I think really what I was just trying to say there, guys, right, is if you're letting other people's perspective, other people's judgments of you dictate your personal scoreboard, you're always going to suffer from imposter syndrome, right? Because you're always going to be wondering, like, what do they think of me? Am I really that good? Like, where do I stand? And you're just going to be constantly on that hamster wheel in your head, second guessing yourself. Whereas if you approach this as like, I'm just going to always try and get better. And there's no, I've made it and now I'm here. It's just a constant like, I'm getting better, I'm getting closer, I'm improving. If you're approaching life in that manner, then you're really like, you're playing golf. You're keeping score against yourself, ideally, rather than really playing against competitors. And that to me is a very powerful mindset, but it's also really valuable for keeping imposter syndrome at bay. Because it's just, we only are ever going to see a certain side or a certain story to any person. But understand, especially true for those that share or tell their story on social media. There's just no way you can be 360 degrees fully transparent. Even if you could literally watch every moment of someone's life, you still wouldn't really know how they're interpreting all those experiences. And the interpretation is a big part of that entire process. So I think it's just really important that we all understand and try and move humbly through this journey of life and just keep score against yourself and just constantly try and be today a better version of the person you were yesterday. And if you can really approach it that way, things like imposter syndrome are a lot easier to keep at bay, in my opinion. Just my thoughts and experiences, though. Hey, it's the 17-year-old dude again. I get what you mean about wholesaling stuff, but how would I get started? Where would I find a seller? What's the best way to build a real estate network? So first of all, the best way to do anything is to find someone else that's already doing it and learn from them. So I would really encourage you, go find the local networking events in your local real estate market. And what's great right now is most of them have moved towards Zoom or other online platforms, which makes it easier than ever to attend them and attend every networking event you can. Oftentimes, because they're all embracing Zoom, they're either very cheap or even free at this point. So again, really easy to get into it at this point in time, in my opinion. Beyond that, start connecting and making relationships with local investors. Again, if you're brand new to this and you're a 17-year-old kid, you don't have to impress anyone. You're impressive just for being your age and being interested in this. And so if you can just kind of approach this and approach it humbly and literally just like ask people, hey man, it's really cool that you own an apartment building, or it's really cool that you're a full-time flipper. Is there any way I could learn more from you while still providing value? Like, could I drive you around? Could I be your chauffeur for a day? Could I, pick up your dry cleaning? Could I clean your house? Could I clean your office? Could I help you organize your paperwork? Is there some task that you really don't want to do that I could help you with and literally just get to spend time around you? And this is something so many people undervalue or don't really internalize. And a great example, like there's so many great examples, but one great example that stands out for me is when I first met Dylan McLaughlin. Dylan, you guys maybe recognize him from my YouTube channel and stuff. He used to live in the mansion here with me. When we were still, maybe a few months into knowing each other, I was in the process of fixing up a fourplex with my business partner, Adam Skeeper. And Dylan offered to come and just help us put together IKEA boxes for a kitchen for a night. And so literally just kind of hung out with Dylan. We got some pizzas and beer. I feel like Dylan probably didn't eat the pizza or beer. It was probably just me and Adam, but we just hung out, put together these boxes, did the IKEA thing. And in the meantime, Dylan just got to pick my brain. And I'm happy because I'm getting some free labor and just getting to chat with someone that's interested in things I'm interested about. And Dylan's happy because he kind of gets to see behind the scenes of how I manage one of my jobs. Of course, when he shows up, I'm going to walk him through the whole project, explain the numbers, things of that nature. So again, it's not hard to find these opportunities or these relationships if you put yourself out there. Now, Dylan may have offered to work for free for some other people and they might have turned him down. But the key was just continuing to offer value and understanding that some people will reciprocate. And from that, you'll be able to really build some powerful, valuable relationships. If you are paying a high rent, is this a good idea to get a house for yourself and maybe rent out the basement? So house hacking, rent hacking, finding ways to live low cost is always a smart plan. Now, exactly how you choose to implement that is certainly a personal decision, but I think all of us should have the goal of living for free. If you can find a way to not have to pay for shelter, understand the average Canadian spends 30 to 40% of their income on shelter. If you can find a way to not need shelter, one, you can literally live off of like 30 to 40% less than the average other Canadian, but it also means you can save the difference. And that's like a compoundingly powerful position to be in. So the more you can reduce your needs, like your savings rate just grows so powerfully. But like all of a sudden, if you're saving 10%, understand it's going to take you 10 years to save up 1 year's lifestyle. Or 9 years, sorry, because you're living off of 90 and you're saving 10. If you're going to save 50%, every year you're literally saving up 1 year's lifestyle. So if you're saving 10%, it's going to take you 9 years. If you're saving 50%, it takes you 1 year to save up 1 year's life expense. So if there's a way where you can get to 50% or greater, to me, it just becomes so easy to save money when you know that you're saving so much of it in regards to like years of life bought. And that's really something that I guess I haven't talked about in a while on my YouTube channel, but I think you really need to view it that way because sometimes people just get caught up on trying to always make more money, always make more. But there is something powerful about saving money as well. And not needing a lot of money in the first place is the best thing because that's the ultimate freedom. And that to me is even greater than building up a real estate portfolio, even greater than building up a business empire, is building up really strong, powerful relationships. Because your relationships, your connections, your reputation, your knowledge, your skills, those are the only things that like really can't be stripped away from you. Everything else can kind of be taken away. But those factors can't. And that to me is kind of like one of the most portable forms of wealth, in my opinion. Does Canada have anything like the USA with regards to a 1041 exchange? Junior, I think you mean, I'm pretty sure it's called 1031, but no, we don't have a 1031 exchange here in Canada. The closest thing we've got is vendor take-back mortgages, right? So in Canada, if the deal's structured correctly, a seller can potentially defer the capital gains on a property over the period of 5 years. And in essence, again, if they structure the mortgage or the debt correctly, they'll have to recognize 20% of the gain each year over the 5 years. So that'll help smooth some of the tax burden and maybe reduce the overall net taxes that you're responsible for. But it's nothing near as powerful as a 1031 exchange. Now, there's a few asterisks there in regards to like real estate for business, like within businesses, if it's not like and stock shares and stuff like that, but like specific to real estate and residential rental real estate, there's nothing like the 1031 exchange. It's lame. Single family house or townhouse for beginner because I can't seem to find decent duplex around Windsor. What is your take on townhouse or single family house as a first property? So there's a lot to actually unpack in that simple little question. So there's a lot of assumptions and a couple of limiting beliefs, in my opinion, that you packed into that comment. So what I first want to say is is it really hard to find a duplex in Windsor? Is it hard to find a multifamily? I don't actually believe it is. Now, maybe it's hard to find one on realtor.ca or the MLS, but I would really encourage you start getting on some wholesaler email lists and some private seller email lists, because there's a lot of deals going on in Windsor. And I definitely, like, I know in Cashflow Tribe, there are literally dozens of people every month buying multifamily properties in Windsor, Ontario. So there definitely is properties available there. Now, that being said, that's not to say all multifamily properties are the better investment, or you can only invest in multifamilies. You can certainly invest in townhouses and single families. The bigger question is, and this is the problem with a lot of newer investors, you're not focusing on a bigger roadmap or a plan or what you're trying to accomplish. So what does real estate investing actually mean to you? Are you trying to earn active income, passive income, and to what ends? And so this is something I explore at length in Cashflow Tribe. So I'm not going to repeat the same speech. I literally gave like a half-hour speech about two hours ago in Cashflow Tribe. But in essence, you need to get clear on your why first, and then your goals, and then break that into milestones, and then have that plan dictate what strategy you invest or you approach real estate with, and what market you invest in. So, yeah. So again, like single family townhouses, shouldn't you as a first property? I mean, it doesn't really matter. So the bigger thing is getting clear on what you're actually trying to accomplish. Is it okay to get money from a private lender from US, Las Vegas towards 20% down payments? Are there any implications? If you're a Canadian, I would just be careful, because it's very unusual to have an American lend a Canadian money for a real estate transaction. Usually when I see that stuff happening, it ends up being scammy or fake, and I just hate seeing people get taken advantage of. So just really do your due diligence if you're dealing with a US lender and you're in Canada, just because that stuff just doesn't normally happen. So yeah, be careful. That would be my advice. Who would you recommend as a brokerage to go with in Windsor? So if you're looking for a realtor in Windsor, I'd recommend you hit up the Win City team. So that's originally Cassidy. You may remember Cassidy from Windsor OREC and just my YouTube in general. She originally started Win City. Her business partner Adita, he has stepped in and he's kind of taken over. Adita has also been on my YouTube channel as well. And he's now got a team in Windsor called Win City Real Estate. I think they're very investor friendly. I would recommend you start there. But who else? I don't know. I'm drawing a blank right now. I know there's a bunch of great investor-oriented realtors, though. If you're in Cashflow Tribe, just ask the tribe, and I'm sure they all know a handful of different Windsor realtors. How is Adelaide and Hamilton Street area in London? Would really appreciate your feedback. Adelaide and Hamilton. So specific to exactly Adelaide and Hamilton, I mean, like, it really depends on which direction we're going from that neighborhood, because I would argue Adelaide and both Hamilton really are kind of major arteries that bisect, and so oftentimes the neighborhoods change when you go from one side to another. So certainly, like Adelaide Street itself, specifically south of Hamilton, yeah, I think that area is a little rough. I think that definitely you're going to have some of the rougher tenant profile, especially if you're on Adelaide Street proper, south of Hamilton. Again, that's not to say that it's a terrible thing or you can't make money or you shouldn't invest there, because I know investors that do well there, but it's definitely something to not naively go into either. Now, if you're talking about pockets of along Hamilton, east of Adelaide, so for east of Adelaide on Hamilton, Again, it's very kind of street by street, block by block. Overall, we're kind of talking blue collar, right? I don't think that that would really surprise anyone. I think there's some pockets that are actually quite nice on the north of Hamilton a bit. And then the further we go down Hamilton, then there's going to be some nice little pockets on the south. So like there's some nice green space and park areas. There's a lot of older like communities that are in there, right? So like, getting closer to Hamilton, Egerton, there's a very large Portuguese community there. I think there's a lot of really cool local stores and restaurants and businesses. I think there's a lot of unique architecture and building layouts as well. So there can be some interesting opportunities as an investor there. And again, like I've found in general, a lot of like the baby boomer immigrant generation to be very favorable to negotiating and being business oriented. So like, I think the Hamilton and Egerton area is great for that personally. But again, it really depends on who you are and how you approach investing and negotiating and stuff. But I love dealing with like, that whole community there. And if you're looking to aggressively go there, oh shit, I'm drawing a blank now. But there's a brokerage whose office is right there, Panero. So like Panero Realty is kind of in the heart of Ham and Egerton. Now, if you're going in the other direction and we're heading west of Adelaide and south of Hamilton, we're getting into the Soho area. Well, again, I think that area is pretty rough. I think the closer you get to the hospital grounds in Wellington Street, I think the faster and harder that area is going to gentrify. Now, there are some issues when you get really close to Wellington or if you go past Wellington, because again, then you're going to get like the Salvation Army's there. There's some geared to income and social assistant housing, which seems to really have some social integration issues with some of the tenants and people that reside there. So like that can really cause disruptions in the local community and like hurt the tenant profile and the sort of people that want to live in the neighborhood. But yeah, I think Soho, I love it just because you're so close to downtown. So I'm biased towards it. I actually don't own a lot of real estate there right now. I have in the past, but I would aggressively buy there for the right opportunity. But these days I'm only looking for apartment buildings. So there's not a ton of apartment buildings in there, but if one comes up at the right price, I would definitely take it down. And then if we're talking north of Hamilton, well, there's not a ton of real estate until you hit the tracks. And then if we're hitting the tracks and you're going north of that, well, I feel like you just drive the wrong area, and we should talk about that in a separate. So I think that covered it. I don't know if that's interesting or super boring, guys, when I go super down a tangent, like into like London, Ontario specific real estate. Like YouTube, let me know. Do you guys enjoy that? Instagram, is that of value to you? Are you guys of the mindset where even if you don't want to invest in London, you can still extrapolate lessons from it? Or is it like the moment you're like, oh, boring, he's talking about London, lame, I'm out? I'd be curious for that feedback. Feel free to let me know in those comment sections. In the meantime, I'll hit up YouTube and find a few more comments. My mortgage is with First National. I'm 2 years in, 3%, 30-year amortization. Have you dealt with them? I'm wondering if I can refinance, and if not, go to another lender. Raz, I've probably dealt with First National. I don't remember anything super specific in regards to dealing with them versus other lenders. I would literally just call them up and chat with them to find out what your breaking fees are. Most people assume that their breaking fees are a lot worse than they actually are. I would suspect that it's probably not that bad. But again, it's just a phone call away, and it's not like anything bad happens if you call just to find out what your breaking fees are. So I would just do that. But yeah, otherwise, if you go find another lender, certain lenders will pay your breaking fees or help try and cover those fees because they want your business. I feel like that's not nearly as common of a practice as it once was, but you might still be able to find some lenders that do that. All right, appreciate the love in the comments. Instagram. Okay, let's see what else going on. Hey Matt, should you do segments on the hotspots in each market in southwestern Ontario? Oh, you should do. Yeah, Mario. If you guys are interested in learning more about the hotspots in southwestern Ontario, what you need to do is check out the Weibo Limo Tour. So literally, it's like a one-day virtual limo tour, so you can enjoy it via the comfort of Zoom. And we literally tour Windsor, Chatham, Sarnia, London, St. Thomas, and sometimes Woodstock and Brantford, and literally show private off-market deals that you can buy right then and there. But even more so, we do market updates. But if you want a great video on the southwestern Ontario real estate markets, we're going to be releasing all the footage from the last Wibble Limo Tour on that, I believe this Friday or next Friday. So definitely look forward to that. One of the must be next Friday. Next Friday or next Sunday. Anyways, sometime in the next 2 weeks, that'll be coming out. It's like a 40-minute video, just hitting on a lot of different things about the local southwestern Ontario markets. What's your opinion on expensive markets such as Montreal, Toronto? Any tips for those markets? Yeah. So if you're going to be investing in those expensive markets, just make sure you've got a clear business model and plan, right? So buy and hold real estate does not work well if you're trying to get cash flow in really expensive markets, right? If you can't hit the 1% rule, you're not going to cash flow well. And if your goal is cash flow, go to a market where you'll cash flow well. And a lot of investors I find, they never get clear on their goals and their why. And so then they're just kind of throwing darts at a dartboard, and they're letting their emotions really hijack their thought process and dictate where and how and what they invest in. And that to me is insane and very scary. So I would really encourage you guys, don't start with like, I'm a real estate investor in Montreal or Toronto. Start with like, why am I a real estate investor, and work your way down. And if it turns out that investing in those markets is the right decision for you, more power to you. But don't start with the market and then try and shoehorn a strategy into it. I see that happen every single day, and it doesn't end well. All right. What else is going on here? YouTube? Anything in Niagara, Welland, St. Catharines market? Mario, from time to time, we get some deals there, but we don't we don't have a huge focus in those markets, but I'd say maybe once a month we sell a deal. Usually it's going to be in like the Welland or St. Catharines area. For whatever reason, I don't think my guys usually go quite as far as Niagara. Matt, who would you call to help design a commercial building to residential building? I'd find someone that's done it before. So again, if I'm going to be learning something, I don't want my expert or my team of experts learning it with me, ideally. So I would go into that neighborhood, find some other properties that have been converted from commercial to residential, hit them up, find out who did it, and then really just, reach out to them, ask them. They'll be able to even give you specifics, right? Like they might be able to build out a pro forma for you. But one thing I would caution is I think a lot of newer investors think that developing, repurposing, raw land deals, that there's something really sexy about those transactions, and that there's something more noble about them than wholesaling or flipping or BRRRRing, just a small multifamily. But there's a lot of complexities involved with those more bigger projects. And in addition to the complexities involved, they also just take a lot longer. And so if you end up missing your shot on one of them, it could take years before you really figure it out. Whereas with a wholesale, your downside is really just the initial time you invested into negotiating on the deal. If no one decides to buy it, as long as you had an exit cost, you're free and clear afterwards. Whereas if you were literally doing a raw land development deal, you might not find you're underwater until halfway through the process, and then having sunk hundreds of thousands of dollars into that deal. And so while converting commercial to residential isn't nearly as big of an undertaking as what, a raw land deal is, there's definitely still a lot involved with it. And so while we may eventually see cities and municipalities be open to rezoning properties and allowing them to be repurposed from commercial to residential, you're also going to need to take a look just to the general surroundings, right? Because there is often at least a mild logic behind most cities' zoning rules and restrictions. And so for them to want to change it, they're likely not just going to do that on a whim. So if your city or municipality hasn't already given guidance that they're very aggressively open to doing this, I'd want to talk to City Hall, find out, is this a possibility? Where are you guys at, and things of that nature. Yeah, but definitely if you can find someone that's done it before, I would just get their people. And that's also a great sign that it can be done. All right, YouTube, what else is up? Is it tougher to invest as an agent? More barriers? I don't think it's tougher to invest as an agent. I don't know if it's necessarily a lot easier though either. I just think it's different. I think at the end of the day, it's more about you. Are you going to be the person that finds it easy to be an investor or hard to be an investor? Are you the sort of person that's like, man, I worked so hard on my real estate business, I spent 1 hour on realtor.ca today? Or are you going to be the person that stays up till like 3 a.m. and doesn't go to bed because they're up on realtor.ca and this is just a fun game that they're learning how to play, right? Like, I can certainly tell you the latter person there is far more likely to succeed at this game, whether they're a realtor or not a realtor. I think that that's really the important thing to understand, right? The moment you decide that it's inevitably going to happen, like, I'm going to be successful at this is happening, I'm going to be able to grow a beard, eventually that shit comes through. It might take you a long time to get there, but you're eventually going to get it if you just decide that, like, that's the reality you live in. Now that doesn't mean you don't have to put all the hard work or effort necessary to achieve it, but a lot of people, like, they don't actually want it, and that's the problem. That's why they never get it. If you really want it, like, I would just put forth, there's never been anything in my life that I've ever really wanted down to the core of my being that I didn't eventually get. Now, there's not many things I ever really want, but that's also a sign that, like, it's usually just about getting that mindset and setting your intentions and then just ruthlessly executing towards your goal. Hey man, I'm in the States, so I'm trying to invest in Florida, but what are some tips you have in investing in a duplex? I'd be trying to house hack. Well, tip number one is you're already on the right path if you're trying to house hack, because house hacking is the key. Beyond that, I would make sure that the house hack you get into is a live for free situation. If you're going to house hack, why not do it fully right? And fully right means getting to live for free. So if you can find a way to live for free, I think that's absolutely the golden standard when it comes to house hacking. Beyond that, don't be afraid to, like, test it out for noise transfer. So a lot of, like, beginner investors or first time buyers will be too scared to do this. But, like, I would literally go with my bros and, like, even bring a portable Bluetooth speaker, crank it on one side of the wall and stand on the other side of the wall. Do you hear it? Would that annoy you? What's the sound transfer like? A few little things like that could really, make the period of house hacking a lot more enjoyable for you. Beyond that, if you're going to be inheriting tenants in a house hack, be very honest with yourself about those tenants you're inheriting. Don't lie to yourself. So again, some people are super neurotic and they can only live beside, the ideal tenants. Other people are very easygoing. I'm relatively easygoing, so it wouldn't necessarily stress me if my tenants weren't weren't complete angels, but I'm sure that there are individuals that literally couldn't sleep at night if that's the case. If that's you, make sure that you buy the right property or you get the right tenants in that property. Because again, some people just will drive themselves crazy in that situation. Beyond that, with house hacking and a duplex, it's all pretty simple. It's all pretty straightforward. I don't know how common this is in the US, but there's lots of duplexes in Canada that won't be separately metered. And some people don't realize that that's even a thing until they get into buying properties and doing deals. So again, in a perfect world, I'd rather have separately metered properties or units, because that way the tenant's going to be responsible for their own utilities. And here in Canada, at least you want them responsible for electricity if possible, just because electricity can be expensive. And yeah, I think that's probably most of the advice I can give you for duplex. Again, you know, in an absolute ideal scenario, the duplex you buy, maybe it has two separate like green spaces or outdoor spaces or deck spaces. Because again, it's amazing. Like some people have some amazing house hack situations where like they get the backyard and it's all fenced off, or like they get a side yard and it's all fenced off. And that can really just increase your quality of life. But just know what's important to you and your quality of life, and make sure that whatever property you buy and house hack fits within that. Now that doesn't mean be a princess or a diva and demand the absolute best of everything, but just know yourself and make sure that you invest or buy within kind of that guideline or criteria. What's up, Maine Real Estate? Hey Matt, regarding your team's wholesaling mail campaign, how many letters do you guys send out in 1 month? And out of those letters, how many calls on average do you guys get? So this is something we talk at length about on Cashflow Tribe, and you guys can hit up Adam Martin every Tuesday night. He teaches on Cashflow Tribe, so he's much more in tune with exactly where our shit's at. But I think we probably do, I don't know, 100, somewhere from 70 to 200,000 flyers a month, I would think. But don't quote me on that. Adam Martin would definitely know better. Of that, you know, how many calls do we get? I honestly don't know. I want to say that usually, like, it would be a bad flyer it would be a very bad flyer campaign, I think, if we got less than double-digit responses from 1,000 flyers. So, like, I think we've only had that happen once or twice, where, like, maybe we got 7 calls from 1,000 flyers, like, on average, and we're like, holy shit. Actually, no, maybe we've even had it worse than that. But yeah, I would say normally you're going to get a few dozen-ish, but Adam Martin could definitely get you more specific numbers on that, because he runs the day-to-day now of the wholesaling team. I've been kind of slowly stepping away all of 2020. With a 60K job and 250K cash, how many properties can you start with, can you scale with, and what sort of income cash? Raz, that's, there's so many variables there. I know you gave a lot of details, but there's still actually a lot of variables. So to just summarize, if you're making 60K a year, you've got $250,000 in cash, what can you do with that? Well, let's first take a step back. What can you do with that without even real estate? Or without having to acquire real estate? Well, with 250, you could probably privately lend, and you could probably privately lend consistently and earn 10% per year. So you could probably make 25K a month, or 25K a year, truly passively, with $250,000. So just one random thought right there. Beyond that, I'm just going to use like my market, because like there's so many arbitrary assumptions I'd have to make in order to determine what you could do with that sort of money. But the biggest thing is you should focus on what you're trying to accomplish and then reverse engineer that, rather than be like, I'm here, what can I do? Because again, I can tell you one thing, but we might be going in the wrong direction to where you really want to go. Because like, if my assumption was that you just literally wanted to lean fire, 25K a year might be enough to lean fire, especially if you want to van life it or house hack or something like that. But on the flip side, usually we can get debt, or like usually we can acquire real estate in Canada at a 80% loan to value, right? So if I operate under the assumption that I can use this $250,000 at an 80% loan to value, that means I should be able to control a little over $1 million in real estate. So if I can control a little over $1 million in real estate, now the question becomes like, what's the ROI in any given market on controlling $100,000 in real estate. Well, here in London, as real rough rules, rule of thumbs, I'd say you can acquire around $100,000 a unit. So if you got $1 million, well, in that case, that's going to be about 10 units. And then here in London, Ontario, you can often cash flow $100, $200 a month per unit. So boom, that's going to be, $10,000 or sorry, $1,000 or $2,000 a month, right? Or about like $12,000 to $24,000 a year, which actually gets us kind of close to that hard money lending amount. Now the difference is with the cash flowing properties, I'm also paying off the principal, and eventually I can increase the rents, and ideally my cash flow will increase and my returns will only go up from there. And the benefit of appreciation on the underlying real estate asset as well. And so that is something, if you assume like even just a 3% appreciation rate on $1 million, that's going to be $30K a year. So you're going to get your $24,000 a year in cash flow and $30,000 a year in appreciation. But that's certainly a more hands-on investment strategy than literally being a private lender on $250,000. So just everything is relative. Hey Matt, I'm 23, currently living in Mexico City. How would you house hack in a country where interest rates are at 8% approx? I would literally just make the numbers work. So again, like in general with house hacking, right? The more units or the more bedrooms, likely the greater the chance I'm going to be able to make this business model work. Just because as the rentable square footage as a percentage of the overall asset increases, it naturally means, right, that you're going to be living off of less, which makes it more likely that this business model is going to work. So I would randomly start off with like, what's a 5-bedroom house cost and what can I rent out 4 bedrooms for? Does that business model work? If the answer is I get to live for free, boom, I already found an answer. If the answer is no, okay. Then like look at like what's a 4-plex cost and what can I rent out 3 units and live in 1 unit? Or can I rent out 3 units, live in 1 unit, and still rent out one of the bedrooms in my unit? I suspect that there's a way to make that work. Because certainly you can house hack and live for free in pretty much anywhere in Canada. I don't know, probably there's very specific neighborhoods in Vancouver and Toronto that you couldn't, but certainly in the greater Toronto area and the greater Vancouver area, you can find house hacking scenarios where you could live for free. So yeah, I assume you can do it in Mexico City even with 8% interest rates. But it's just a matter of like, taking that sort of approach to it. Do you have any investment in USA? I do not own any real estate in the USA. For me, the whole reason I invest in real estate is because it's a simple business where I have direct influence and control over the assets and how they're deployed. And so because of that, I focus on having a very specific competitive advantage in a market and then leveraging that competitive advantage to being successful in real estate investing. Whereas if I was to randomly invest all across the US or all across Canada, I don't see what my competitive advantage would be to investing in those markets. And if I don't have a competitive advantage, I don't really want to invest. If the game's not like rigged in my favor, I don't know if I want to play if it's with real money. So probably why I don't gamble. Matt, do you know of a financial planning software to help make financial decisions? I do not. Are you allowed to close a house with a... You didn't finish your sentence, Tick, so I don't know what your question was. Are you allowed to close a house with a... With a what? Matt, how long I would need to wait before I can be able to refinance a property? Travis, there's no set formula, right? So it's going to depend upon where you're investing in. It's going to depend upon who your lender is and all those different factors. Now, I know that's not a satisfying answer. So the answer I'll give you instead is generally when dealing with an A lender, unless you've already put a plan in place to do so otherwise, most investors are going to find it difficult to refinance in under 6 months, and a lot of them will end up having to take a year or just a little over a year to refinance. Now, however, there's all sorts of mortgage products and lenders and strategies that you could implement to be able to do it much faster. So, kind of depends which answer you want. But certainly, I know people that are able to do it very fast, right? Like people that buy, close in cash, and then refinance at a different valuation, literally like the same month or within the same quarter. That's very common. So again, just depends upon your strategies, your connections, and how you implement them. Can individuals with serious criminal convictions get a mortgage and own real estate? Is this a problem in your opinion? I literally don't know. I also don't I don't know what is defined as a serious criminal conviction. So I'm sure there's different things, but I'm not aware that that specifically keeps you from it. Now, if you've got bad credit or a history of not paying debt obligations, that will certainly impact and factor into whether a lender would be willing to lend to you. I don't know. Does anyone know that? Does a criminal charge or conviction matter when it comes to lending? Again, I'm sure if you were charged with fraud or something like that, there probably are implications, but I don't know. Can murderers get mortgages? Mortgages for murderers. If that's not a niche, someone's going to need to carve it out. Once you achieve financial freedom, how do you go about real estate investing full time? Matt, once you're FIRE, it gets pretty easy. Most investors are going to do it with either JV partners or private lending or hard money lending or something to that effect. Hey, Instagram, I'm about to get kicked off here in 2 minutes, so just wanted to give everyone FYI. We're going to drop off here soon because Instagram cuts you off after an hour. Matt, can you close a house with a physical cash if you don't need any financing? Absolutely, Tick. People do it all the time. And in fact, it's sometimes a refinancing strategy to buy a house in cash. Is it okay to save 20% down payment each time, even if it takes up to a year? Yeah, if that fits within your goals, taking a year to buy every property. Now, the problem with that logic is I think most people would rather do it faster if they could. So they'd rather compress time and get to that destination quicker. And if that's true of you, then I think you really need to start getting comfortable using other people's money, right? OPM, or other people's resources, OPR. And so once you stop worrying about your money and your qualifying power and start using your network and your potential business partners or JV partners, money and their borrowing capacity, it gets so much easier to succeed as a real estate investor. Whereas with Instagram just ended on me, so I'm going to share that. Boom. Oh man, and that makes you write a title. We'll fill that out later. All right, what else is going on, YouTube? Yeah, so 20% down, you're fine to do that, but at the same time, there's faster ways to do it, and I suspect that you'd rather do it faster if you could, so why not do so? All right, we're naming this, we're posting it to IGTV, and we're done. Hey, how would one go about trying to become a private lender? It's really easy. If you've got money, Triggs, you're good to go. Just start lending people. If you qualify as an accredited investor, so say you're rocking, 6 figures you're looking to lend out, and you're worth north of 7 figures, or 7 figures or better, just look up the definition of accredited investor. If you're one of those, slide into my DMs. But otherwise, most private investors are going, private lenders are going to go one of 2 routes. They're going to either go through a broker who's going to introduce them to potential deals to lend money, or alternatively, they're going to network directly with investors and lend out on those projects as they see fit. So it's not too hard to find people to borrow your money. Really though, Triggs, what's important is figuring out what your risk tolerance is and what your comfort level is in regards to, do you want to be secured? Do you want a first place mortgage, second place mortgage? Are you willing to do just a unsecured note? Do you like to live dangerously? Very much a personal decision, but something you need to figure out if you're going to be a private lender. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Super awesome that 50 of you guys would just chill with me while I smoke weed. Actually, you know what? I still got half a joint. Hit me up with a couple more questions and let's smoke this. Appreciate the love, guys. How much money is enough to be a private lender? Can one start off with 40K? Yeah, you could start off with 40K. In theory, any amount of money you could privately lend. In practice, probably if you're doing secured notes, you're going to want, 40, 50K at least. If you're doing unsecured, I'd say probably around 10K. It starts to make sense. Understand that unsecured is a lot riskier though, and you're going to get normally you're going to get a much higher interest rate with it, right? So not uncommon in my neck of the woods for investors to be willing to pay anywhere from say 10 to kind of 24% interest rate for a completely unsecured note. On the flip side, for a first place, in theory, people go as low as like 4 or 5%, 6, 7, 8, quite common. Get into like second place mortgages, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, anywhere in that range. And then 16's usually somewhere in between the second place mortgages and the unsecured debt. Ooh, that's a lot of smoke. How do I see myself in 10 years? I hope I am a completely different person, but I hope that in a good way. 10 years from now, I hope I'm on an island. I hope I live on an island. Well, I'm sure that'll change 100 times between now and then. Beyond that, I just hope I've got like a killer team around me. I think I'm doing a great job of building a good ecosystem and a good team, but I can always do better. I just really want to attract the most interesting, unique characters and the most dedicated, hardworking people, and just have an ecosystem where they're constantly around me, because I believe you're the sum of your inputs, and I want to be very careful about who I let influence me. And I hope that 10 years from now, I'm almost ruthless in, being careful with who I let influence me and who I let around me. Good vibes only, that sort of thing. The 1% rule is just literally you want 1% of your acquisition cost or the value of the property to be equal to the gross rents on the property. So if I buy a fourplex for $400,000, I want to rent it out for $4,000 a month. And the reason I want to do that is because at today's interest rates, it's a very strong indicator that you'll cash flow with that rental property, which means you'll make money every month that you could in theory spend or live off of. And so for most investors, that's going to be a desirable circumstance. J. Cole's False Prophet just came on my headphones. I love that song. Anyways. Why does the 1% rule not cash flow in your market? Is there insane property taxes, or like utilities are insane, or the cost of borrowing's insane, or just you can get better returns? Ooh, that's an interesting question, Matt. Which of your businesses do you I wasn't talking to myself in the third person. Matt Sim asked the question. Which of your businesses do you think will grow your wealth the most? It's something I think about a lot. I don't know, and I think in a way it depends on how you define it. So technically, I think the two best investments I'm making is my social media brand, so my YouTube channel and just all the social media stuff I put out, because I think long term that's going to pay off in some crazy ass way that I can't even predict. But I know it already does in the micro every day, just through like small interactions and like occasionally opportunities come my way and stuff like that, and the credibility it grants me. But I also believe that the other great investment I'm making is in the people and the team and the partnerships I'm making today. So that kind of feels like a cop out though. So specifically to the businesses I currently own and operate, I currently have a software company. I currently have a real estate education company. I currently have my apartment buying business. I currently have my personal portfolio of real estate. I currently have my wholesaling business. And I've currently got like the revenue I make from like YouTube and events and stuff like that. Of those current businesses, I suspect that my real estate education company or my apartment buying business, that one of those two will likely result in generating the greatest wealth for me currently. But I still suspect that whatever gets me the greatest amount of wealth is still on the horizon. I probably haven't even gotten involved in it yet or thought about it yet or anything like that. So fingers crossed, we'll find out. All right, I smoked all this. Thank you guys for hanging out for the bonus minutes, and I'll see you next Monday night. And otherwise, we're putting out a video every single day, so I hope you guys are enjoying it, because we're like 220 videos deep this year already. We've actually put out more than a video a day. Doing that Gary Vee challenge. So we'll see what's up. Thanks, guys.